The conference room fell silent the moment the quarterly numbers appeared on the screen. Daniel Harper sat at the far end of the polished oak table, unnoticed by most of the employees filing into their seats. Dressed in a plain navy suit without any company badge, he looked more like an outside consultant than the founder and sole owner of Harper Industrial Solutions, a manufacturing company with nearly 5,000 employees. He preferred it that way. For 12 years, Daniel had stayed out of the spotlight, allowing hired executives to run the business while he quietly attended meetings a few times each year under the title of strategic advisor. Very few people knew the truth. The board knew. The CEO knew. His personal attorney knew. And no one else. Especially not his son-in-law. Across the room, Ethan Brooks adjusted his tie and opened his laptop. At 31, he had climbed from junior analyst to operations manager in just 4 years. He was smart, ambitious, and confident, sometimes too confident. Daniel watched him carefully. Neither Ethan nor Daniel's daughter, Lily, knew Daniel owned Harper Industrial Solutions. Years earlier, Daniel had told Lily only that he had retired after selling most of his investments. He wanted his children to build lives without relying on family wealth or influence. Ethan had applied to Harper Industrial without knowing any family connection existed. Daniel had quietly instructed human resources to treat him like every other applicant. No favors. No shortcuts. Now came the real test. The acting CEO, Margaret Lewis, cleared her throat. "We've had excellent growth," she began. "But rising production costs mean every department will need stronger leadership." She clicked to the next slide. "I'd like operations manager Ethan Brooks to explain his restructuring proposal." Ethan stood confidently. "Thank you." He walked toward the screen, speaking with practiced ease. "Our biggest problem isn't labor costs," he said. "It's outdated management thinking." Daniel raised an eyebrow. Several executives shifted uneasily. Ethan continued. "We've become too cautious. Some senior leadership is protecting old systems instead of rewarding innovation." His words weren't entirely wrong. But then came the sentence that caught everyone's attention. "If ownership were actually paying attention," Ethan said with a slight laugh, "they'd replace half the executive floor tomorrow." A nervous chuckle spread through the room. Daniel remained expressionless. Margaret briefly glanced toward him. She knew. Ethan didn't. The presentation continued for another 20 minutes. Despite the bold remarks, Ethan's analysis was impressive. He had identified waste in the supply chain worth nearly $8 million annually. His proposed automation schedule was realistic. His employee retention ideas were thoughtful. Daniel found himself nodding several times. The young man had talent. But leadership required something more than intelligence. It required humility. When the presentation ended, Margaret smiled politely. "Questions?" Silence. Then Daniel slowly stood. "I have one." Every eye turned toward the quiet man in the back. Ethan looked slightly puzzled. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't believe we've met." Daniel smiled faintly. "No, we haven't." He walked toward the front of the room without rushing. "My question is simple." He folded his hands. "You mentioned that ownership isn't paying attention." "I did." "What evidence led you to that conclusion?" Ethan hesitated only briefly. "The company moves too slowly." Daniel nodded. "Anything else?" "The executive team avoids calculated risks." Daniel nodded again. "And ownership?" Ethan shrugged. "They're invisible." A few managers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Daniel smiled. "Interesting." Margaret quietly closed her laptop. The room grew unusually still. Daniel turned toward the employees. "I appreciate honest opinions." Then he looked directly at Ethan. "In fact, I built this company by encouraging people to challenge me." Ethan frowned. "I'm afraid I don't understand." "You will." Margaret stepped beside Daniel. "There is something everyone here should know." Her voice carried across the room. "Mr. Daniel Harper is not a consultant." Nobody moved. "He is the founder." She paused deliberately. "And the sole owner of Harper Industrial Solutions." The silence became absolute. Ethan's face drained of color. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Several department heads stared at Daniel in disbelief. One employee accidentally dropped his pen. Daniel looked only at Ethan. I've been listening for years. Ethan swallowed hard. I had no idea. I know. You never said anything. No. Why? Daniel answered calmly. Because titles influence behavior. The words hung in the air. I wanted people to speak honestly, not perform for the owner. Ethan looked embarrassed. I'm sorry about what I said. Daniel shook his head. I'm not. That surprised everyone. You criticized leadership because you believed the company could improve. Daniel smiled warmly. I agree with several of your points. Relief flickered across Ethan's face. But, Daniel continued, leadership is also about respecting people whose responsibilities you don't fully understand. Ethan lowered his eyes. Yes, sir. You assumed ownership wasn't paying attention. Daniel gently tapped the presentation remote resting on the table. I've read every one of your quarterly reports. Ethan blinked. Every recommendation. Every cost-saving proposal. Every employee survey. I even approved funding for your warehouse modernization project before anyone else supported it. Ethan stared at him in complete astonishment. You did. Daniel nodded. I believed in your work long before you ever knew my name. For the first time, Ethan's confidence gave way to genuine humility. I'm sorry I judged someone I'd never met. Daniel extended his hand. And now we've met. After a brief hesitation, Ethan shook it firmly. The tension dissolved into quiet relief. Daniel smiled. Now let's revisit your proposal. He looked around the room. Not because it came from my son-in-law. Gasps echoed through the executives. Ethan closed his eyes. Oh no. Daniel laughed softly. Yes. Another round of stunned silence filled the conference room. You married my daughter 3 years ago. Ethan looked as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. And somehow, Daniel added with a grin, this is the first time either of us has truly been introduced. For the first time that morning, the entire room erupted into genuine laughter, while Ethan realized that the biggest lesson of his career had nothing to do with business. It was that character is revealed when you believe no one important is watching.